Hi everyone. In the video series looking at various cameras and introducing them and how to use them, this is the Voigtlander Perkeo I. This is a fixed lens folding camera, and what that means is that it's got a lens that is attached to the body. It's not ever going to have another lens than this. The lens folds out on this accordion from inside of the camera, and yeah, that's what that means. This lens is, this camera was produced between 1951, 52, and 1955. I have not yet been able to figure out how to date these exactly, so I don't know how old this one is, whether it's an early or a late model. My understanding is that they were all produced to look the same throughout the entire production run. And it has no light meter. The shutter on it has speeds of bulb. You can see right there, bulb, 1/125th, 1/50th, 1/100th, and 1/200th. This happens to have a pronto shutter on it. Later in the video, we'll talk about the various shutters it came with. The viewfinder on it up here, this is a viewfinder camera. And what I mean by a viewfinder camera is that looking through the back of the viewfinder here, you get an idea of what the camera is actually going to see. It has an off-center reverse telescopic viewfinder. I don't know what the reverse telescopic part means, I just saw that in the manual. And the problem with it being off-center is that and higher than the lens, is that you're going to get some parallax at closer ranges. I don't know what the distance is at which parallax begins to be an issue on this camera. Let's see. The viewfinder, and this is typical of Voigtlander. They make very, very high quality components. The viewfinder is in a dust sealed box. So even though this camera is 60 plus years old, it has no dust inside of the viewfinder. And this is my only camera of this age, or even newer camera, the viewfinder types, of which I can say that. It's extremely, extremely well made. The viewfinder itself covers somewhere between 90 and 95% of the camera frame, or I'm sorry, of the image frame. And the focusing for this is done on shutter. So here's the shutter unit, right here. This is the focusing, you just turn the lens to focus it. And for film, it takes 1/20 size roll film and shoots 6 centimeter by 6 centimeter, or if you're using the Avoirdupois system, 2¼ inch by 2¼ inch negatives. Also, just so you know, if you want to stick around after this video, I'm going to show you some pictures I've taken with this actual camera. This has the 80mm Vasker lens on it, and there were 3 different lenses. We'll talk about that in a minute with these cameras. This has the 80mm Vasker lens. Fantastic lens. All of the lenses Voigtlander used for these were really, really fantastic, fantastic lenses. A bit on Voigtlander. As I was researching this camera, I came across some interesting things about Voigtlander. One is that the company Voigtlander predates the invention of photography by about 90 years. Originally they made scientific instruments and things like that. They also developed the first mathematically computed lens, and it was computed by a mathematician named Petzval, and he developed the f3.7 lens that they named the Petzval after him. So well done, math nerd, on that. I don't know if he was a nerd. I'm making the assumption he designed camera lenses. The camera model, as I said, was made from 51 to 55. The target market was, insofar as I can tell, entry-level users, because this is their base level camera. It's a very, very small camera for the 120 film format. It is the smallest 120 camera that I own, and the smallest that I've ever seen. It's really, really, really tiny. It's hard to express how tiny it is. Anyway, so it is very small for its format. Now this was accomplished because it has a heavily convex front door. You can see here how far out that door bends, and that allows the shutter and the lens to be pushed way back as far as the accordion can collapse and just slightly stick out of the front of the camera when it's closed, like that. There you can see. And so the camera body itself is not much wider than the film that it takes. There we go, we can kind of see it there. And so it is known for being one of the smallest, I don't believe it's the actual smallest, but one of the smallest 120 roll film cameras. They don't get too much smaller than this. It was made in Germany. Oh, dang it. That's the sound of me accidentally closing my outline as I'm recording. It was made in Germany after World War I. Still opening my outline, I'm going off memory here. And it was preceded by the Voigtlander Perkeo 3x4 and contemporary with the Voigtlander Perkeo II. The Perkeo II, I believe the difference is that it had different lenses, and it also had a shutter lock and a shutter counter up here, or somewhere around that. It was followed by the Perkeo 3 or the Perkeo I. I've also seen it the Perkeo 3E. I don't actually know what the designation is. The Perkeo 3E was, which is what I call it, was based on the 2. And the Perkeo 3E was produced from 55 to 57. The Perkeo I camera here came with one of 3 different lenses. Came with a 75mm f4.5 Vascular lens. It also came with an 80mm f4.5 Vascular lens, which this has, and an 80mm 3.5 color Focar lens. So as people wanted to shoot color photography, they had a lens designed for color film. And outside the scope of this video, but color film theoretically focuses a little bit differently because there are different layers of emulsion. In fact, modern Kodak films have up to 20 layers of color emulsion. Not really germane to this video. The shutters included Vario Pronto, which is one make, Pronto, like this one, Prontor, Prontor S, Prontor SVS, and Synchrocomper. And those various shutters would have had different speeds, different settings, and somewhat different quality, though I honestly couldn't tell you which was the best and which was the worst. The Pronto that this has, like I said, goes up to 1/200th of a second. Some of those might have been faster, I'm not honestly sure. Or they might have all done the same thing and just been different makes. Feature for the camera. So next, if you happen to have one of these, or if you happen to have a manual, and you can find a PDF version of the manual for this online, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through this camera and look at all the features in the same order as the camera manual. So I'll give you a second here to get your camera manual ready, and then we'll go through it. Back, and if you notice a slight change in lighting, that's because I changed the aperture on this lens so that we can get a little bit more light in here as we're taking a look at this camera. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the features overview. Now, if you have the manual, take a look at it, and what we'll do is just go through the manual an item at a time. We're going to start with the top of the camera. This is the exposure lock check window, and what this does is when the camera's ready to take a picture, there's a little arrow that points forward, and it's going to be hard to see, but let's see what we can do about that. There we go. You can kind of see the little arrow. I'm going to take an exposure here and show you what happens. You can see that arrow. Well, it's supposed to go away. In this case, it didn't. Let's try that again. There, the arrow's gone, and when I release the button, it's still gone. And then I advance this to wind up the film where there's actual film in it, and then the arrow would reappear. Okay, refocusing. Sorry about that. And okay, so that's the exposure lock check window. This is the release key, they call it, the shutter release. as it's contemporarily called. This is the accessory clip, they call it. It's also called an accessory shoe. It's a cold shoe, meaning it does not have any kind of electrical current. This camera doesn't take a battery at all, so there's no power source in it. Let's see, Optical Finder right here. This is the Optical Finder as we looked through it earlier, also called a Viewfinder. And then this is the film winder, and there's an arrow on it that indicating which way to turn it. You can't turn it the other way, but it says how to turn it. Anyway, inside the camera's front, so we've got the camera front. I'll show you that real quickly. Again, you've seen plenty of it this video, but camera's front, not a whole lot on here. So camera inside front, we have the, let's see, the cable release thread. That is in a tricky and awkward position. Here it is. So right there, oops, let me get this set down here. And right there is the cable release thread. And so if you have a cable release, what you do is just screw it in there. It's just this, like a standard cable release, and it allows you to do no shake shutter releases. These are the struts. There's one on the top, one on the bottom, and these provide support for and guidance for the lens and shutter mechanism as the camera's opened and the bellows is extended. And then once it's extended, these bear the weight so that the bellows don't have to. You should not even ever touch the bellows on these cameras, especially if it has its original bellows like this one does. The exposure setting ring is right here, and there's a little red line right there. Let's see if we can... Too close. Okay, you can see the little tiny red line right here. That's the line that indicates the shutter speed. So right now, the shutter speed is set at 1/50th. Now it's set at 1/200th, 1/100th again to a 50th, 1/125th, and bulb. Setting it halfway in between 1/25th and 1/50th, I don't think makes it do 1/37th and a half. I think it's just 1/25th or 1/50th. It's not like the aperture. The aperture can be set to any partial stop because it's not a stopped aperture ring. Then let's see, the next thing we have is the closing keys, as they're called. There are two buttons right here underneath my fingers, these silver buttons, and you push them down, and that's how you close the front cover. The next part is the front support, which I'm fiddling around with here. And what that does is allow you to set the camera down and have it be stable on the ground and level. So you can set it up on a surface, like a fence or a wall or whatever. Set the shutter release for a timed release, or I'm sorry, set the actual timer on the shutter. Run, get in front of the camera and have your picture taken with your family or just in front of scenery. Now we have the shutter setting lever, and this is right here. This is what you use to cock the shutter with. So we'll bring this back into focus. What you would do is you move it counterclockwise, and that sets the shutter. So we're going to set this to 1/125th. I'm going to open up the back of the camera here so that as I release the shutter, you can see through it. That's 1/125th. 1/200th looks a little bit more like this. And to make it a little bit easier to see, I'm going to open up the shutter all the way, or I'm going to open up the aperture all the way. So there we go. Then the next thing that we have is, and I have got to start printing these outlines. The flash contact. So right here is where the old-timey flashes would plug in. You know, I couldn't tell you what the sync speed is. I think it was based on how the flash worked or the type of bulb. That old-time flash stuff is a mystery to me, and I'm not even sure if you can still get a flash that works on this camera. And then the last item is a self-timer over here. So you move this clockwise, cock the shutter, and my self-timer sometimes doesn't like to go. So for me, there's no running to get my picture taken with my family. It's me standing there, nudging the self-timer along until it's done. It's really kind of annoying, actually. This camera does not have a double exposure prevention, so if you don't want to take double exposures, then you just have to police yourself when it comes to how you use the camera. Moving now to the back of the camera. Oops, I often forget to put that shutter support down. The back of the camera doesn't have a whole lot to see. It's got the film, the film count window right here, and there's a little circle right here, and you rotate it to open and close the window, and we'll take a look at what that does in a minute. You can see a little X disappearing and coming back. And it's also got the camera back catch. What you do is you push down on these at the same time, and then you open up the back of the camera. The camera bottom is similarly simple. It has the tripod bushing, which is a 1/4-inch tripod mount, and then I believe, however, that this has a 3/8 insert in it. So anyway, I think the actual tripod mount's bigger with has an insert. Then this is the front open button. So if you want to open the front, you just push that. Here we're going to close it, and I tend to, when I'm closing it, push the button again, because that way I don't feel like I'm forcing the front closed. And then inside the camera, back of the camera, let's take a look here. We've got the take-up spool over here, and the film roller. There's a film roller here and a film roller here, and the film pressure plate right here on the back of the camera. And then we have here the accordion along each side, and the lens, the back of the lens itself. And these old cameras also came with a reminder to use film 120. And so the way that these old 120s worked, here I'm going to show you here how to load and unload film. Let's pretend that I have completed this roll of film. So I've just finished this roll of film, and it's all ready to go. What I do to empty the film is I lift up that lever, the film advance winder, and then I rotate it a partial turn, because it's got a catch in there, so that if you rotate it a partial turn, it won't fall back down. And then I can remove this. Now, the film that this paper came off of, the spool for it, will be over here. So I remove this spool, move it over to this side, rotate this backwards until it slides back into place, and then rotate it until it lines up with the grooves inside the 120 film. It's got a little shape in it that lines up with those grooves nicely. I rotate it until then, and now I can see it's rotated, and I'm ready to go and load my next roll of film. The film loads fairly similarly. Just pull out this little device here. This is the film holder on the new film side. This is not an actual roll of film. This is just paper backing on a spool. And for this, there's a little spring mechanism over here. You can see. So I put the film there, push the spring mechanism down, let it close so that the nubs are inside the holes of the spool. Get this thing seated so that it's actually mounted properly. There we go, that's better. Now it slides back into place. I take this paper, move it across the back of the camera, slide it into, there we go, the take-up spool. And there we go. And I'm going to advance it until we see an arrow. There you can see the arrow. And it lines up approximately with that first first film roller. Normally this paper backing stays a little bit more taut, but there's no film on this. And now, hopefully we'll be able to see this okay. I'm going to advance this until there's a number in the red window. Oh, there's some arrows, that's good. And there's a line, that's good. Another line, another line. The leader on this 120 film is a bit more than a foot long, so it takes a while to get to the actual film. Got another arrow, and here's a dot, or circle rather. Another circle, another circle, and now our number 1. The circles are in there to get your attention so that so you don't overwind the film accidentally. So you can see there the number 1. Now, once I've taken my picture, great, I just took a prize-winning photo, yay! Just advance. Now we're on image 2. Well, now we're on image 2. Shut that door to prevent light from getting in and fogging your film, and you're ready to go take another picture or stash it in your pocket until you get to a point where you are ready to take another picture. One thing I forgot to mention is never touch the lens on this camera, and if you can avoid it, don't touch the glass on the viewfinder as well. It's a really good way to damage some of the critical optics. The next thing we're going to look at is how to do macro photography with this camera. Voigtlander made or maybe still makes, I'm not sure, an attachment for this. It's a 32mm push-on filter. It's called a Focar. They made a Focar 1 and a Focar 2. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause and I'm going to insert a table into the final video. And the table will show you how to do the Focar focusing. So pause, if you need this information, pause the video, copy the information you need, unpause it, and we'll be back in a minute. And what I'll do is explain how to put the Focar lens on your camera and how to use it for taking photos. Okay, so I'm going to open the bellows, and now I'm going to readjust my focus here so we have better focus and better lighting. Probably could have done this before I started videotaping it, but oops. Okay, so this is the Focar 2. I do not have a Focar 1. You can see already the effect that it's having on the camera as I move it in front here. And it's basically a magnifying glass that fits in front of your lens. And it just slides right onto the front of the lens this way. It's a slightly snug fit. There we go. And the difficult part about that is always making sure that you don't touch the front of the Focar magnifying macro lens as you're doing this. Okay, so now knowing the distances for your macro setting, or for your macro photo, you would adjust your distance scale here to the desired distance from your macro image. All right, and take your picture, and that's it. It's the same exact thing as taking a normal picture, which we'll go over in just a second, with the exception that you are a lot closer to your subject. So, how do you go about taking an actual picture with this camera? It's a pretty old camera, and if you've never used an old camera, the technology is going to be much different than what you're used to. So the first thing that you want to do is get a light meter, is get the light reading. And in order to do that, you need to have a light meter. You can also use something called the Sunny 16 rule. The Sunny 16 rule means that if someone is in sunlight, like this, let's say this is sunlight, then you would set your aperture at whatever the film speed, at f16, and then your shutter at the film speed. So if I had this loaded with ISO 100 film in the sun, I'd set the aperture at f16 and the shutter at 1/100th of a second, and my exposure would be pretty darn close. With black and white film, there's a little bit of leniency and it works really well. With color film, a little bit less so, and with slide film, I don't use that rule at all. I bring a very good light meter with me. You can actually get a light meter for your phone, and there's a couple of free light meter apps available, at least for the non-proprietary type of operating system on my phone. And anyway, so once you have your meter reading, and you know that you need to use a 1/100th of a second at f8 because it's slightly shady outside, you're going to open up the front of your camera. You don't want to just keep it open. You don't want to open it and close it all the time either, like I'm doing for this video, but you want to close it when you're not using it. So I'm going to set the aperture on this aperture setting ring to f8, set the shutter speed to 1/100th, cock the shutter, line up the shot, take the picture, advance the film, looking through the back window obviously, to the next frame, close the window, and I'm not going to be taking any more pictures for the next few minutes, so I'm going to close that back up. That's the basic process for taking a picture with really any folding camera. It's pretty easy to do. Now, one really nice thing about these cameras is they have what's called a snapshot setting. There are two snapshot settings actually, one for close focus and one for far focus, or near zone, far zone. The exact boundaries of the near zone and far zone are going to be different based on each lens. Not each camera, but each lens. Because, for instance, the near zone and far zone on the 80mm and the 75mm Vaskers in these lenses could be different. I don't know what they are, but they could easily be different because the focal points on the lenses are different. Or the focal distances on the lenses are different. For this camera, okay, so I'm just going to show you how to read that first. Let's zoom in here again. You can see on the top right there, this is the infinity symbol. I'm sorry, infinity 60 0. It's not 0, it's an O. Now if we go over this way a little bit, we've got a triangle. So if we set our focal point, and our focal point is that triangle, to match this triangle, and we set our camera at f8, and again, bearing in mind the rule f8 and be there, this gives us what's called near zone focusing on this camera. And the near zone focusing means that the triangle focuses at 11 feet, and f8 gives you a near zone focus from 8.5 feet to 18 feet. So right now, with the triangle lined up with the focusing indicator and the aperture set at f8, this camera is focusing on everything that is 8.5 feet to 18 feet that way. If I go up here and I change this to the circle, it's now focused on everything that is 18.5 feet to infinity that way. And that's the far zone focusing. The far zone focal point is 33 feet from the camera. Now the next thing we're going to take a look at is how to do hyperfocal distance on this camera. Alright, so we're here to do hyperfocal distance, and let's see, I'm trying to get good lighting here. Here we go. You can see on the front of the shutter there are numbers 16, 11, 8, 5.6, 4.5, 4.5, 5.6, 8, 11, 16. Now what that means is that at f16, f11, let's say f16 for right now, everything that is between that f16 and this f16 will be an acceptable focus, with your max optimal focus being again at the focusing indicator. So let's say that it was a sunny day outside, and I was doing some street photography. I had this open, and I just wanted to catch an image that was maybe 35 feet away from me, but I didn't want to have to calculate the exact distance and try to fiddle with the focusing. So I've got infinity here at f16. Down here is 8. Oops, down here is 8. And what that means is everything from 8 feet to 60 feet is going to be in focus at f16. At the same exact setting at f8, everything from 11 feet to 33 feet will be in focus. So that's hyperfocaling, and what it allows you to do is set the lens. And all lenses have a hyperfocal distance. Modern lenses are not marked with it, however. But it allows you to set a lens at one setting. And so I can set this for my hyperfocal distance again. And now with this camera, though not all folding cameras allow you to do this, I can close the camera. And I can come back and open up the camera and then take an image within the hyperfocal range and have it be within a reasonable amount of focus. So if you've ever wondered what those marks are on your shutters or what those red lines are on your lenses, that's hyperfocal distance. For exposure times, this has a leaf shutter in it instead of a focal plane cloth shutter. Cloth shutters and reflex mirrors in modern SLRs cause a lot of camera shake. Leaf shutters cause basically no camera shake. So you can hand hold this camera down to a 25th of a second, which is why that's the slowest shutter speed, and not get camera shake. And I've done that, and without any kind of issue. I can typically hand hold an SLR down to a 15th, sometimes, if I'm not tired, an 8th, and still get a sharp image. But anyone should be able to hold this at a 25th as long as they're not moving and get a reasonably sharp image. And if you need to shoot slower, the manual for this indicates you can get a sharp image down to a fifth of a second by supporting yourself up against a wall or another person. Maybe not another person. So that is the Voigtlander Perkeo I review and features and how to use it. And as I promised, now in the video I'm going to share some of the pictures that I actually have taken with this Voigtlander Perkeo camera, and I hope you enjoy. This is a really, really great camera and a whole lot of fun to use. In fact, it's the camera that got me into medium format photography. It was my first medium format camera and my second folding camera, and this camera solidified my love of folding cameras. And to this day I still believe folding cameras are the most beautiful type of camera ever made. They really are quite gorgeous. So, I should probably check this to see how it's advancing. Anyway, so if you liked this video, if it was helpful, if it answered some questions about your Voigtlander or other folding cameras in general, please give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos about cameras, and I have bunches and bunches of more of these planned for the next few months or year, subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, or suggestions for future videos, please leave me a comment in the comments section, and if I have the knowledge and equipment, I will absolutely record the video for you. And if I haven't addressed something or you have any other kind of question, I would be more than happy to answer it, and I'm usually pretty good about getting those answered fairly quickly.